Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a preview of a game called Maximum Override. This is a game that's currently being developed by a company called Alien Trap, and it's been in early access as of the 26th of January 2016. I have clocked about 2 hours on this and thought that it was worth showing off, so that's what I'm doing. Maximum Override is a chaotic city destruction game. You basically wreak havoc in a randomly generated city with anything you can find. There is no story visible or evident in the game. I'm not sure there ever will be one there. The game makes no sense, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but the lack of a story might result in the game falling apart after a few hours of play. The game does offer quite a few features. You can possess and take over cars, helicopters, wrecking ball cranes, bridges, rocket cars, giant mechs, UFOs, monster trucks, big rigs, tanks, and more. There's currently 3 procedurally generated cities to pick from, as well as the option to create a custom city. I imagine they're going to add more later on as they develop the game. The game has a few different modes as well, which includes G-Man elimination, which involves eliminating all the G-Men in the city within the time period, arcade mode, which involves destroying as much of the city as possible within the time period, and Zed mode, which is the sandbox mode with no timer and basically no restrictions. My experience with the game so far has been pretty good, or I'd say okay. First thing I notice is that it says controller recommended, yet the most you can do is select main menu options. None of the buttons do anything until you actually click start. The controls do feel noticeably sluggish and unresponsive a lot of the time in game. This can make driving and flying vehicles unnecessarily difficult. There are some exceptions to this though, like when you've possessed a giant globe statue. Once you get some momentum going, you'd expect it to be hard to steer, which it is. Flying helicopters needs some work as well. The controls should be refined and split up a bit more to allow an easier flying experience. The optional game modes were a good touch. I found G-Man elimination mode is a fairly challenging mode because of the time management. You have to figure out the best way to eliminate your targets as promptly as possible. The G-Man's positions are randomized each time, which means you have to figure out new ways to finish the level each time. I found arcade mode was a good balance of challenge and fun, mainly because it was just purely causing destruction and moving from one thing to another as quick as you could. One thing that added an overall challenge to each of these modes was that each thing you possessed had a limited amount of health points that would drain while you possessed it and would drain while you damaged it more. Some items you possessed would explode or were rendered useless when you unpossessed them, so it prevented you from reusing them as well. Zen mode is as advertised. I was able to get in, relax, explore at my leisure without a timer hanging over me. There was basically no limitations to it. I didn't have to worry about the health of possessed objects either. This gave me a chance to find more things to possess and practice a little more. It's a very chaotic and messy type of game, but in a way this is a big part of its charm. There are some inevitable bugs and issues that will need to be ironed out though, like non-playable characters being able to unfairly clip through buildings. I like discovering what I could possess and what kind of chaos I could create. I did find that there's quite a few things you can possess too, like a fire hydrant which you can shoot a jet of water out of, and it basically kills anyone or destroys any buildings in the way. There's a vending machine which you can use to fire cans at people or buildings, destroying them in the process. There was a wrecking ball crane. That was fun. In different levels, there's different things you can possess as well. In one level I found a UFO which was fun to use. You could beam things up and then drop them. There was a Ferris wheel in one level, and then there's a few more big things here and there which give you different ways to create chaos. I found the amount of collateral damage you can cause and the lack of consequence that followed a bit funny as well. Destroying buildings feels pretty satisfying. There's just something therapeutic about it. The added first-person mode, despite having some clipping issues, was a nice touch and a nice option to have. Unfortunately, the game has crashed a few times on me, but this seems to be mainly if I was playing arcade mode. Overall, the gameplay is fairly simple, but it's made diverse by the different ways you can use possessed items. It's the kind of game that feels fun and stress-free, something I don't see a lot of very often. Unfortunately, it looks like it may get pretty repetitive, so I would suggest playing it casually or for stress relief. The visuals look as good as they really can for the art style and type of game this is. It has a nice cartoony and childish vibe which complements the violent and destructive nature of the gameplay, so it adds to the amusement of the game really well. The level of destruction looks good, and there's a minor level of gore, so it's not overdone, but it's not underdone either. I liked how the non-player characters made shocked faces as soon as they saw danger, or as soon as you possessed vehicles they were driving. Unfortunately, the game is very poorly optimized on a GTX 980 Ti with the game set on the fantastic setting. I average around 30 frames per second with spikes up to 100 frames per second and dips as low as 2 frames per second. Setting the graphics to good oddly made it run worse, and I eventually had to put it on its lowest setting, which is fastest, to be able to run the game smoothly with a little more consistency, but even then it had a lot of moments where it lagged out to an unplayable point. Music is very bouncy and uplifting, which you hear right from the main menu. In-game it's just as uplifting, bouncy, and slightly humorous as well. The music has some diversity so far, and some of the songs have a bit of a retro tone, which was nice. It does, however, lack a lot of sound effects, primarily collisions, explosions. Some sound effects are inconsistent, they're there one moment and they're not the next. It kind of takes a bit of fun away, but hopefully once they refine this aspect, it should all come together to quench your thirst for destruction. Fortunately, you can hear the nice music very well, so it's not completely silent. Now, the menu and settings are very basic. It lacks a lot of options. The video options are located in the game's configuration, which shows up just before you launch it. It has a decent range of preset options, which is fine considering it's meant to be light in the graphics card. Controls are also located in this section as well. It would have been a lot nicer to go with embedded options to avoid having to relaunch the game if you want to change something, which I had to do each time I wanted to turn down the graphics. One thing the menu does lack, mainly due to this being an early access game, is an inbuilt bug report system. Once again, this particular title requires you to visit a separate forum. Not a fan of that. As I mentioned, early access games should have something inbuilt to make it easier for users to report bugs. The user interface and heads-up display is simple and not overly cluttered. It's not too bland and not too basic, but it kind of works with the game's art style, so you can ignore how dull it is. More importantly, it has good visual feedback, so you know what's going on in all the chaos. Looking at the update history of the game on the Steam page, it seems the last update was back in June this year. From what I can interpret, the updates haven't been all that great. Something slightly alarming is they said they would be working on the next big update for next month, which was in June, but there's been about a 6-month gap since then. A large portion of the updates have been mainly fixes and not enough new content. The game is currently going for $6.99 US on the Australian Steam store page, because you know how Valve is, they don't give a crap. I can recommend this game, but with some heavy caution. I'd recommend it for some good stress relief, but I'd avoid it because of the lack of updates and issues I stated above. I like what the developers are doing here. They have a great concept, so I'd like to see them progress further, but without updates, I feel that not only me, but many others are going to avoid the game as well. Links will be in the description if you'd like to find out more about the game. Thank you to Alien Trap for making this game, and thank you for allowing me to showcase this on my channel. I'd also like to thank each and every one of you who watched the video this far. As usual, ladies and gentlemen, I will see you in the next video.